DNC Vice Chair. Welcome back to the desert.
So I think it's in part because I was greeted at the door by Peggy that I actually come in this room thinking a little bit about Pennsylvania. And thinking in particular about Gettysburg. And I'm thinking about Gettysburg not just because the current guy in the White House fired most of the park rangers who help escort folks around to see those hollow grounds where so many people fought and died at a critical inflection point for this country. But I'm also thinking about it because I gave a speech on at Gettysburg on those grounds a number of years ago when I ran for U.S. Senate. And I said something then that somebody reminded me, Malcolm, was maybe a little too prescient. That democracy actually requires something of us. I mean, I tend to think about it as an inheritance if you're lucky enough to get one. We have somebody that passes you something down that has good bones, but it has some floorboards that you have to change. It has a roof that leaks and it just won't stop. It might have some back taxes that you weren't prepared to deal with. But in this moment, I think about that simple fact that democracy does in fact require something of us, of each and every one of us. And it's unfortunate the ways in which that's made and laid plain every single day. You know, the guy who's in the White House right now started his entire political career by recycling somebody else's slogan idea. Even the slogan, "Make America Great Again," was stolen from somebody else. Even that's not original. So we have a guy with a recycled slogan, with recycled bad ideas, and with a recycled view of what America should be. I think about what he has said to us constantly, or what he has attempted to say, that he wants to make America great again. You've heard it. I think you're aware. But I've been questioning, does it make America great, as we saw yesterday, to deport a 2-year-old child who is a citizen of this country? Does that make us great? Does that make us big? Does that make us strong?
Hell no.
Does it make America great to rip away Social Security, which is not a gift, I want to be clear. You paid into it. And you paid into it as a sacred promise that when you needed it, it was going to be there for you. And more to the point, we understood as a nation that it didn't make us great to have people in the golden years of their lives not able to eat, not able to take care of themselves in all of the numerous ways that we all know we deserve to be taken care of, and to feel the dignity and the decency and the respect that comes from having your basic economic needs met. Does it make us great to cut Medicaid and Medicare, which provides a majority of the support for folks who are in long-term care, which is responsible for paying for over 1/3 of all live births in this country, that ensures that so many young people across this nation who are raised in families like I was have access to the type of care that we know we all deserve? And does it make us great to be, I never thought, we're fighting with Canada? I just want to say, when you fight with Canada, you're probably wrong. You're probably wrong. folks. And we're fighting with them. And we can laugh about it, but we should be crystal clear that in this country, Canada is the #1 trading partner for 46% of all states in this country. We should be clear about that. There are hundreds of thousands of jobs that are directly connected to that key economic relationship that we have developed over generations. And the same is true with trading partners across the world. The same is true of folks in NATO who continue to watch a president who would lick the boots of Vladimir Putin instead of stand up for him and the Ukrainian people. So I struggle to understand what he means when he says he wants to make America great. But this is an important point for us when we think about democracy requiring something of us. When we think about responding to somebody who is so bastardized what it means to be American in this nation, what the promise of this country was all about, then the question is sort of what do we do? And I do think in this moment that we do face a core debate within our party between flight and fright. Between whether or not we should run away, stick our head in the sand, or whether or not we should stand up and fight like hell for this country every single day. I think we ought to stand up and fight. I think we ought to stand up and fight. I think that there's too much progress that we've made and too far that we still must go that we don't have the luxury of giving up in this particular moment. But do hear me on this, Democrats. A fight fails without a dream. I make this point, and usually I start with this because sometimes it shocks folks when you see a little young black gay kid from North Philly about to say what I'm about to say. And I've learned over the years that if you front load anything that might put people off kilter in the beginning, then you have time to win them back later on. But I decided to do it here in the middle to make this point. That I am not a Democrat because I hate Republicans. Hear me on this. I'm not a Democrat because I hate Republicans. I'm not a Democrat, to be even further clear, because I hate Donald Trump. I want you to understand that when I became a Democrat, somebody shoved a clipboard in front of my face, the only thing I knew about him, if I knew anything at all, was that he had like a cameo in Home Alone 2. That's all I knew about this guy. What I did know is that as complicated as things were for me growing up, me being here today is made possible by the fingerprints of Democrats who came long before me, who had a simple idea that this country ought to work for working people and working families, not just billionaires and multinational corporations. It ought to actually work for us. So I have this crazy idea, and most people are sitting down. Peggy, you're standing up back there. You better not pass out. If you any CPR. But I have this crazy idea that in America, you ought to be able to have one good family sustaining job, not 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 jobs. I think that's what we ought to have in this country. We do that by doing things like raising the minimum wage all across this nation. We do things like making it possible for people who have a good idea to actually open that small business and go out and pursue their dream. We do that by putting people in a position where they have that basic level of economic security. As somebody who used to work at the Chamber of Commerce before I got elected to office, I will tell you this: the #1 reason people don't start small businesses is because they're worried about their health care. #1 reason. #2 is access to capital, but I don't want to get too far off the point. So I think you ought to have one good family sustaining job, or the ability to start a business. I think that if you decide to have or expand a family, that job ought to afford you the ability to buy a home in a neighborhood, in a community that's safe. And if you have kids, you ought to have the ability to send them out the door in the morning and know that they are going to a good, fully funded public school where we pay the educators treating our educators like garbage and like political footballs. But we allow them to do their jobs and teach our young people. I think that you ought not be worried about that kid being shot in the classroom while they're at that place. And you know that they're going to come home safe. And then I think they should have the ability, because of that high quality education, to go off and get their own good family sustaining job and start their own business that they have a good idea. And then you ought to be able to retire with a level of dignity and decency in the home where you raised them. That's what I think we ought to be fighting for in this country. Now, folks like the current guy have no ideas on making that possible. His only idea was tariffs, and it hasn't worked. His only idea is sending out mean tweets at 1 and 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm concerned. And his other idea, which is insidious, but we should be very clear about how effective it has been in the course of our nation, is to try to divide us up. He can divide us up by race, by religion. Try to confuse us. Try to get us bought into this false idea that, well, that person looks a little different than you, so you probably shouldn't trust them. That person got a different hairstyle that you wouldn't have, so you should be a little concerned. That person wasn't at your faith community on Sunday, so they might not have the right kind of values that you have. And we understand that that sort of division, that sort of hatred, that does not solve any of the problems that we have in our real lives to making that reality that I laid out possible. So here's what I know. I grew up in a working poor family in Northfield. My dad was trained as a social worker, Temple University, if you know it. And he was lucky that one day while he was at school, a cute little thing named Kelly, my mama walked in. Now they had me. And I always make this point that I got the best parents in the world. I really hit the jackpot, okay? Second only to your parents, who I assume were parents. But the trouble is with my parents, as great as they were, and as great as I thought they were, they did not like each other. And so, what that meant for me is they separated when I was young. I got my first job at 12 years old, wash the dishes at a little restaurant. And what that job did was just give my mama a little bit of wiggle room. Some of you might know about needing wiggle room. And I was very lucky that even though we moved, as I said, a bunch of times, even though I needed to chip in what I could, I had health care because of a little program called CHIP that Democrats fought for. When my parents found themselves in between jobs, they were able to depend on unemployment, something that Democrats fought for and won. When my mom got sick and had a stroke before we lost her, she was able to be in a safe environment because of Medicare and Medicaid, something that Democrats fought for. And so we have a lot of folks, like this president, that were born on third base, think they hit a home run, who don't know anything about what we know. Who don't know anything about the struggle of just trying to make it work. And so I want to be clear in this moment. Yes, we have an existential threat with a guy who believes he's a king. But I don't know about you, but I am crystal clear on this fact. I'm not bowing to a king. To do what we have to do. First of all, we have to go everywhere. Organize everywhere. You just saw this week, or I hope you saw, and if you have not heard, I'm happy to be the first to tell you, the Democratic Party just this week, under the leadership of our new chair, announced the single largest investments in building state and local parties in Democratic Party history. Over $1 million a month is going to be coming out of DC, going into local parties to build our party from the ground up. From the ground up. how we sort of got where we are. We have treated this party like the only thing that matters is throwing a party every 4 years and picking a nominee. But turns out there are other elections. It turns out those elections kind of matter. I think we ought to beat Kim Calvert and send him home after 32 years. But we have to be clear on this. And you all understand it, but we have to be clear on it. It wasn't in D.C. that they gerrymandered our congressional maps beyond recognition. That happened in our state capitals where we live. As unsettling as it is to have a Secretary of Education who does not know what the hell she's talking about, we should be clear that they weren't banning the books where she works. They were banning the books at the local school board meetings where your kids and grandkids go. When we think about the crisis of housing affordability, we should be very clear. A lot of those decisions are being made at zoning meetings that people don't show up for. And so we have to be clear about where our power comes from and how we build a Democratic Party that can respond in this moment. And it's not just about spending every day focused on D.C. There ain't no votes there. The votes are out in our communities, and they're out everywhere. So we have to go everywhere, building our party from the ground up, taking nobody for granted. It means that we have to be a party that talks about more than just 7 states every 4 years. Because when you say to people that these are the battleground states and this is where we're focusing, then you say to folks in areas where Democrats have the advantage, well, we don't need to engage with you because we know you're going to vote for the Democrat. And then we say to folks who are in areas that aren't blue yet, well, we're not going to invest in you because you don't have enough people who share our views, instead of going everywhere and making the case. Going everywhere and talking about that good family sustaining job and that safe home and a safe community and the ability to retire with dignity and decency and kids that get a good quality education. That is a message that we must take to every single corner of this country. That's the type of Democratic Party we have to build. Is this. And this is probably the most important part. And this is the part where people at any level of leadership responsibility, you tell folks the truth. Here is the truth. I wish I could come here today and say that, you know what, I have a plan to get this guy to get in one of those Tesla trucks or whatever he wants to ride out. He's going to come out to the Rose Garden, he's going to stumble through some weird address, but at the end, he's going to resign and he's going to be gone. I wish I could say that to you. I wish I could say that to you. I wish I could say to you that Kim Calvert has decided that maybe after being in Congress basically as long as I've been alive, he's had a change of heart and he wants to come back and get some sun, maybe be at the coffee shop, but not in Congress trying to ruin your damn life. I wish I could say that to you. But here's the reality. We have to respond in this moment the way that folks have responded for generations. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is to underscore this point. There is a reason that folks like Trump, would-be autocrats, would-be kings, they go after history first. There's a reason they do that. We know before, in other contexts, they took books and they went and burned them. Now they're deleting stuff off of federal websites to try to disappear and erase folks. You may have heard they even tried to take the stools that freedom fighters sat on in North Carolina protesting the Jim Crow policies of the 60s and try to erase that out of our history. These were the same people who said we can't take down the statues, but we can hide away the stools that reminded people of our refusal as Americans to take injustice lying down. So there's a reason that they do that. Try to erase these memories, try to erase this critical history, because they want us to forget what the hell we are made of. We should be very clear that this is the same America where women in Seneca Falls and all across this nation, they didn't have a vote, but they demanded it. They engaged in peaceful protests and hunger strikes and tied themselves to the White House bars because they believe that in this country, women ought to be able to fully and equally participate. This is the same country where folks at Stonewall said that no, this country is big enough for me to be exactly who I am and love who I love. This country is big enough for that, and they stood up for themselves. This is the same country that 60 years ago, folks walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And we celebrate that moment while I think being a little misty-eyed on the history. A lot of us think about Edmund Pettus, we think about the incredible John Lewis. But we should also think about the other 600 people who were on that bridge, many people whose names are lost to time. Folks who showed up who were homemakers and lawyers and pastors and doctors, people who were risking their careers and lives showing up that day. And they didn't have the benefit and the luxury of knowing that march was going to lead to the things that it led to. All they knew for sure is that there were dogs at the end of that bridge. All they knew for certain was that there were state troopers who were armed and telling them they better turn around. All they knew was that there were water hoses trained at them, but they marched across that bridge no matter what, not because they knew the outcome, but because they knew it was at stake. And so in this moment, I think too many of us are saying, well, Malcolm, I'll get engaged if you can promise me victory. Well, Malcolm, I'll show up to the rally if I know that this is going to result in the thing that I want to see happen. But I come from a faith tradition that teaches me that if you put faith and some work together, that special things can happen. That if you have the ability to envision something and know what you're fighting for and then show up and do the work, that we can continue to make this nation what we want it to be. I come from a tradition that reminds me that this requires us to do something, that democracy doesn't just work on autopilot, that this is not a TV show where the winners just win because it's the end of the episode, but we actually have to show up every single time and say, no, we will not allow you to turn this country into some third world dictatorship. No, we will not allow you to rip away Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. No, we will not allow you to take over elections. And you know what? When he tried to do it, the Democratic Party sued him, and just 2 days ago in a district court, we won. So, this moment is tough. We know it's at stake, but we should be very clear that this is what we've always done as Americans. His skin's a little more orange. His hair's a little more blonde than the other folks who've come before him. But we've seen McCarthy and George Wallace and all the rest. And we're going to stand up and fight back because we know what is at stake. And so God bless you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.